This is Scott Spears, and I'd like to welcome you to another edition of Scott Spears Now. And as you know, recently we have been covering the story of one of the most popular documentaries in recent history. It is, I believe, still the number one documentary on HBO Max. As of last week, it was the number one film, period. The number one item on HBO Max. It is Surviving Ohio State. The film explores the Ohio State University abuse scandal. It is based on the 2020 Sports Illustrated article, Why Aren't More People Talking About the Ohio State Sex Abuse Scandal? It has been a smash. So many people have talked to me about it. We've had Rocky Ratliff on, Colleen Marshall on, Stephen Snyder-Hill on, and so glad today to be joined by one of the stars of this documentary, Frederick Feeney, a referee. Frederick, is it at Ohio State or were you a referee? Tell us what your position was.
Right. So you started out as a high school referee, and then I had the opportunity to do college, and from the college I built up to a Division I Big Ten referee. Honestly, Russ Hellickson gave me my first opportunity against I think it was Iowa. And so I appreciated him doing that because that's a big step for any official. And as you get in your career, it goes like this. So the opportunity is to do Division I wrestling is you got to know what you're doing. And luckily, I faked myself through all those years. But that's what it was. And it was a D1 match that night, Big Ten match. So,
what's it like being a referee? How close do you get to the guys?
Well, wrestling is a one-on-one sport, right? So I've written a lot of stuff on mechanics. We don't want to get too close. In a pinning situation, you have to get close, flat and close, so you can see the pin, not feel the pin. But you want to stay away so that they're always here in front of you, and if they move right, you move left, right? And you want to know where they're going. You have to know enough about the sport, so if they go that way, you've already beat them there, and they come right to you. So there's a lot to that. That's what makes the D1 guys so good. It's like a baseball umpire. You know, they are so sharp with their mechanics, and baseball is nothing but mechanics. And I've written a lot of papers on mechanics, wrote the Ohio High School mechanics for wrestling, and I was glad that I was asked to do that. And so yeah, it's about mechanics.
How big was Ohio State, 1978 to 1998, the period that we're talking about here with this documentary? How big and good a school were they when it came to wrestling?
Good. I mean, they've won. I don't really know at the top of my head how many national championships or how many national champions they had, but they're a D1 school. They were always ranked top 10, and and they wrestled in a very unique St. John Arena, which is a very intimate type setting because you're there and everybody else is just this far away sometimes. So it was very cool, and I remember going there even as a kid watching wrestling and just imagining, wow, what would that be like? So yeah, it's a very cool thing to do. You normally always have an assistant official too at those levels. So yeah, and again, Russ gave me a call one day and goes, "Hey, you want to come do a match?" Yeah, I had been doing Division III, Division II. And so yeah, he gave me that shot, and I was grateful for it.
I want to talk about the coaches here for a second. Just give me an idea of what kind of guys they wwere. Russ Hellickson.
I mean, he was Olympic. He won the bronze, I think, if I'm correct. I'm sorry, Russ, if it's something else, but I think it was the bronze. And so he was a big name in college wrestling. Big guy, very well respected. So when Russ would go to the table and argue a call, it's Russ Hellickson, and he knew wrestling. Didn't always know the rules per se, and that was my job. And then the assistant coaches were all guys that, Jim Jordan was 3 or 4 time national champion. So they know what they're doing. No, they don't. They don't know a referee's vision of the rule book that I know about stalling and out of bounds and this and that, whatever. But I never got very much grief from them. They would take me to the table every now and then and question a call here, there, whatever. And you just tell them, this is what I saw, this is what I did, we're moving on. And I don't think I ever dinged Russ Hellickson or Jim Jordan or any of the high school coaches. They would argue a call, but it wasn't like an Iowa situation or Manning at Nebraska where they would just get physically, so stupid. And you'd have to ding them or toss them out sometimes too.
Now, we all know Jim Jordan as Jim Jordan the politician, and we know him after this scandal. Before that, how would you describe him? Jim Jordan, the wrestling coach.
Very, very nice guy, easy to talk to. He wasn't a big guy. I think I'm taller than he is. But he was literate, knew, spoke well. He knew everyone. You knew he knew his stuff when it came to wrestling. So I got along with him. I did business with Jim, not early on, but this was after he became a congressman. I owned a consulting business, and he opened a lot of doors for me, and I was friends with him. He helped a lot of my clients get some money that the federal government had owed them, and he stepped in and got these bills paid. And of course, I made money on that, a commission. So yeah, it was just business as usual with both of them. Hey Russ, how are you? Hey Jim, how are you? Or Coach, or whatever it was. It was good. I'll tell you a quick story about Russ. When I did my first Big Ten match, I was pretty nervous about that. I knew I have a mentor, Bob Triana, who was a 13-time D1 official, finals guy, great guy. He was my wrestling coach at DeSales. And I always believed, and he told me this, you wouldn't be there if you didn't belong there. Nobody's going to hire you if you don't belong there. So I had that in my heart, and I knew I got to be pretty good, or I wouldn't be here. So right before the match, Russ came into the locker room, same locker room I used every time I went into St. John's Arena. And Russ came in and he goes, hey Fred, are you ready for a night? And I said, yeah, let's bring it on. It's good. He goes, good. We're going to be green tonight. And I said, well, you're wrestling Michigan State and they're red. Or they're green. So you're going to be red. You wear a red singlet. He goes, well, we can choose to be red or green. And we choose to be green tonight. You got a problem with that? And I said, well, that's not what the rule says. The rule says you could be, not can be. And he goes, whatever. And he shook his head and walked out. And I sat there and go, what the hell's he doing to me? And I walked out, and we brought the captain's medal, and I said, Ohio State, you'll be red tonight. Michigan State, you'll be green. Everyone just smiled at me. So it was just his way of kind of welcoming me to the game, and he never attended to be green, so it was all good.
It's very interesting because Jim Jordan is now seen as a very politically divisive figure, obviously with his support of President Trump and other things in the area. The Jim Jordan, the man today, aside from this documentary and aside from the accusations here, but what do you make of this politician today in 2025?
Wow. He's out there. He's really far to the right. I'm not. But it didn't matter in sports. I didn't care what somebody's politics. It didn't matter to me back then what his politics were either. Today, it matters because I know different things that we had talked about Strauss and about some other things, that he just completely flipped one day when he got interviewed by whoever the hell it was that he got interviewed by. I said, none of that didn't happen. I don't know about it, yada, yada, yada. And I was shocked. I was just flabbergasted that he said that. And I hopped on a plane the next day and went, and I had an open invitation to his office. And I walked in his office, and Jim came out. His office manager was there too, and he knew why I was there. And he said, hey, we're not talking about that. I said, but you know better. He goes, well, I'm not talking about this, and we're done, and you're not welcome in this office anymore. And a guy came over and let me out, and that was the end of the relationship with Jim Jordan. So
Prior to going to the office that day, what did you think would happen?
I knew he wasn't going to back down. I mean, I'm not a guy that holds my words, pretty much. People that know me know that I speak my mind sometimes. Sometimes, that filter you're supposed to be born with, sometimes I don't have that filter. But I didn't expect him to be so adamant about not knowing anything. Even maybe it could have happened, that type of thing. But to this day, he's adamant about it, and he's wrong.
Well, this is an interesting point. When you watch the documentary, and I hope everybody does, it's on HBO Max. What is stark about your portion of the documentary is it really is the Jim Jordan portion of the documentary,
right.
Because you, correct me if I'm wrong, I haven't heard anybody else be able to say with evidence, word, that yes, he definitely knows about this. Now, people can say, I think he knew, how could he not know?
Right.
You're saying in the documentary, and again, correct me if I'm wrong here, no, I absolutely know that he knew.
Exactly. I know he knows. He knows I know. And Russ Hellickson the same way. That night that I came out of that locker room, and I walked down that hall, and they would stand at the end of that hall because their team was in the next locker room beside, and they were waiting for their team to come out. And I said, hey, by the way, Strauss is in there, in the shower next to me masturbating. And they both just looked at me and said, oh, it's Strauss, that's the way he does. And I just didn't know how to handle that. I left. Now, I go back, and what has bothered me all these years, should I have done more? Should I have knocked him on his ass? Should I have kicked him in the nuts? What should I have done there? And I didn't think about it. What about my career? Because I wouldn't have had a career had that happened. I'd been in jail. And when you look at the type of vindictive guy that Dr. Strauss was, he surely would have been vindictive toward me, because he wouldn't have said, well, I did that to Fred, I shouldn't have done that, and I'm sorry. That wouldn't have happened. So when I interviewed with Eva with HBO and we talked about this, one of the things that really bothered me was when I first thought, was I obligated to do more? Should I have done something else? Should I have gone above Russ Hellickson and Jim Jordan? And the answer is I did what I could do. I went and told the head coach and the assistant coach, and I couldn't do any more than that, I don't believe.
Well, this is another stark part, I think, of the documentary that you play a part in, because the majority of people who they talk to are athletes who were at Ohio State at the time. And then there's a guy like Steven Snyderhill who was just basically at the school going for a checkup about something. So but they're kids.
Right.
Now you're not employed by the university at that point, right?
No.
And you also are a working man at that point. So
I was about 40 years old.
40 years old. So
you saw that nice picture that
I did. There's a good picture there. So I think people wonder, how did this happen to you?
Well, Dr. Strauss, he liked who he liked. And I'm not sure, I'm told that there are, in the lawsuit, you could be named or you could be a John Doe. I was a John Doe. I think it was a Plain Dealer or Fox News, somebody outed me and said, well, Fred Feeney is John Doe 16. There are others out there, I am told, another official, maybe two, that this happened to as well. I don't know who they are. I've never talked to anyone else about it. But I knew Strauss. I talked to him. We sat and talked sometimes after a match, before a match, that type of stuff, because he was always there. So I don't know if he had a look he was after. I was much different at age 40 than I am today. I was a lot fitter. And Yeah. Like I said in the documentary, he liked my butt and said I had a nice penis. So
What you go to ref matches,
right,
okay? This is at Ohio State.
right.
What happened? You're done reffing the matches. Take us through this night.
So, as in any high school match that I've done, and I teach this to young officials all over the country, I put clinics on, is when the match is over, sign the book, get the hell out. Because only bad stuff happens. You don't want to go shake somebody's hand and high five people and this and that. It's just bad stuff can happen there. And I've seen it happen to others. So you just sign the book and you're gone. You're out the door and you're in the locker room. And that's literally what happened that night. Just another night of Big Ten officiating. I go back into the locker room. I start to get undressed, and in walked Dr. Strauss. And, hey, Doc, how you doing? He goes, hey, good, Fred. And the locker room, I can't explain how big it was, but it was a huge rectangle. And there had to have been 50, 60 lockers in there. And I was at one of them, and he comes up right beside me and starts getting undressed. And I literally said, hey, Doc, what are you doing? He said, well, there's somewhere I want to be tonight, and I'm going to take a quick shower. And it was like, oh, well, fine. So I've been in locker rooms since I was in, middle school, grade school, high school, and you take showers, you undress with guys, you take showers with guys, but there's no, ogling, there's no, anything like that goes on. But it sure did that night. But I go in the locker room, or I go in the shower and turn shower on, and in this shower, it's, if you can imagine, I walked in here and there's a shower head here, and that's just where I went. And Strauss walked in. He could have picked any shower, and he picked the one right beside. And I went, Dr. Strauss, what are you doing? Oh, Fred, I'm just going to take a shower. All right. He was known and was talked about that he would have bubbles. I don't know what type of soap he was using or shampoo or whatever the hell it was, but it was a lot of bubbles. And I turned and I realized he just was not washing himself. He was masturbating. And I turned and I felt something on my butt, and it was him. And what the hell are you doing? He goes, there's nothing to be ashamed about. And I got the hell out of there, went to my locker, and it wasn't that I was angry. I just didn't know what I should do, And I think I still had soap on me when I went out. And I'm trying to dry off, and he walks down, he's got a towel wrapped around him, and you could tell he was erect. And I go, Dr. Strauss, what the hell are you doing? He goes, Fred, there's nothing wrong with you have a beautiful body, you got a nice butt, and you have a nice penis. You should be proud of that. What are you doing? And I got dressed, and I walked out. I didn't say another word to him. And I didn't shove him. Maybe I should have shoved him. Maybe I should have put hands on him, whatever, I don't know, but I didn't do that. But I walked out, and there's Hellickson and Jordan standing there, as they always did. And I just said, hey, Strauss is in there masturbating, and he goes, and they both looked at me like, that's normal, it's the way he does. And I don't remember anything after that, but I know I would, because I always did, leave, got in my car, and I didn't tell anybody, I didn't think about it until it all came up again when all the press came out later, years later. And that's when I went, oh shit, I was involved and I forgot about that. Or, just kind of pressed that down. And, when all those stuff had happened with, Michigan State and with Penn State, there were reminders, but it didn't make me want to go kill myself. It was kind of the opposite. Should I have done more? What should I have done? And I think I did what I should have done, and that was tell the head coach and the assistant coach.
Dr. Strauss is at Ohio State from 78 to 98. What year did this incident happen?
That's a great question. It's got to be Eva and I had talked about that. It's got to be early 90s, somewhere in that 92, 90, somewhere like that. Because I did 13 NCAA finals. And I was doing the I forget the name of the tournament. The Cliff Keen tournament in Vegas. That was an all D1. I was doing the tournament at Northwestern, which was a huge. I forget the name of that tournament right now, but those are big deal things. If you go back and look at when Ohio State hosted the Big Tens, when Randleman broke his leg and continued wrestling, he literally said it himself. It was just the most bizarre thing I've ever seen in my life in a match, and then went on to win. I was an official, but I was just starting out in college, and they made me the weigh-in official. So I got to do all the weigh-ins for the Big Tens, and that was the beginnings of my Big Ten career. So whatever date that was, that's what it was.
I think what a lot of people are confused about here is here's Dr. Strauss. He's been there at that point for probably 15 years, somewhere in that neighborhood. Yeah. And he did this to the boys because the theory is that he could have pulled their scholarship. They knew to wrestle, to participate, that they had to see him. He had to pass them along. And kids are kids, and, students at that time. These are young men, probably never faced anything like this again. How sure of this how sure of himself must this guy have been to do this to a referee in a public shower?
That's a great question, because it didn't fit his MO, right?
Yeah.
I don't consider myself an ugly guy, but I guess there was something about myself that he liked. We talked. We would sit and talk prior to and sometimes after, just about stuff, nothing else. So I guess he just got it in his head, well, Fred's a good-looking guy, maybe I'll see what happens with him, maybe something can occur. I don't know.
Have you ever thought about it? Did he just believe he was above it? Did he just believe that there was nobody who could stop him?
Well, if you watch the documentary and you look at how he attacked his boss and turned the tables on him and put charges into the medical board instead of after, charges were put on him by the medical board, I think he thought he was untouchable. But there's another aspect to it, and I was never involved in this, don't know anything about it. But, he was the man that knew about steroids. So I believe in my heart, after watching everything, if I had to put, this puzzle together, he had a lot of stuff on a lot of athletes, not just wrestlers, hockey players, swim team guys. I mean, he went, and you heard about him getting into showers all the time, different showers, different locker rooms, different sports. That's what he did, 4, 5, 6 showers a day. Didn't have hell to do with taking a shower. It's about, well, you saw, what's his name? It said, most people take a shower, they face that way. He faced that way.
Yeah.
Now, there's a reason.
Okay, you had conversations with the man.
Yes.
Okay, try to help us all understand, because even in the documentary, he's still a bit of an enigma. There's hardly any audio of him that exists. There's pictures, but they all pretty much look like the same guy in a suit, white-haired man. What was the guy like if you talked to him?
What I remember was he was a very subdued, very quiet guy. He wasn't flamboyant. He was Dr. Strauss. He was just, hey, Dr. Strauss, how are you? And he'd say, hey, Fred, how are you doing? And, we would just talk about my career or this, that, whatever. Maybe one of the kids had an injury, and hey, is Billy going to be okay? And, that type of stuff. And just nothing sexual whatsoever. But there was an interest in, he would say hi, he would come and say hi to me. We'd shake hands, that type of stuff. And maybe he just thought, well, maybe this could go further, but it was not something I wanted it.
He's a confusing man from this regard as well. He's obviously successful in his field. He's got a family.
Yeah.
So I mean, is he? Do you believe is he gay? Is he bisexual? Is he? What is he?
Everyone that I knew him to be gay. Not that anybody saw anything that proved that, and I don't know the difference. Well, I know the difference between gay and bi, but somebody who surely had to have been with a woman because he had a son, right?
Right.
And so maybe he was bi. I don't know, but I don't know. And to me, it doesn't matter if you're gay, straight, pink, purple, blue. It doesn't. I don't care one way or the other. Just I know what I know. I know what I want and need. If it doesn't fit in with your needs, then it probably shouldn't happen. But it should never be forced on. And I think he had an opportunity with the athletes where you don't do the physical, you don't play. And that's, you look at Al, the hockey player. I mean, my goodness. And here's when I came out of that showing at Tribeca. My emotions, my tears, weren't about me. It was about the things that they lost, what Al lost, what Richie and the other guys lost. They left school. They left the sport that they loved because they didn't know what to do and how to deal with it. They just shoved it down, shoved it down, shoved it down.
Al Novikowski, I believe in the documentary,
Yes.
He says he was raped. Absolutely raped.
Yeah, I didn't know Al. And here's the funny thing. I've had people say, well, look at that hockey guy. This is one of the guys that not threatened me, but, had a nasty Facebook message he sent to me. Why didn't he just beat the hell out of that guy? Because he was just a Canadian farm boy that didn't know any better, You look at what Coleman says. Coleman, I didn't know anything. I mean, Coleman's a brute, right? He could have snapped him in half, surely. But, Mark, they didn't know what to do, And I believe, and I know I've talked to some of them, that they did talk to Russ and they did talk to Jordan about this. And you see it in the documentary that Russ says, whatever I can do.
Yeah.
They got together, however I can help you. And then it got shut down. And it's a reason they got shut down, because the Ohio State didn't want this to move on.
Well, that's a very interesting part of the documentary, because 2018, this becomes very public, and the players call Hellickson. Yep. And Hellickson meets with them in a room, and they all tell their stories. And by all accounts, Hellickson's very moved, and he says, I'm your coach, I'm with you, I'll write this note, and then he doesn't.
He said, and it's in the documentary, I have over 500 sons. Well, that's not what you do to a son. A son doesn't come to the dad and say, I need help here, here's what happened. And you say, oh, I'm sorry, that's too bad, but I'm not doing anything about it. So, yeah, that was devastating to those guys when he backed out of that.
We've got to take a little break here, but we're going to come back with Fred Feeney, one of the participants in the very, very shocking but important documentary, biggest documentary in the country right now, Surviving Ohio State, which can be watched, viewed on HBO Max. Still #1 last time I checked, and I think #1 for a reason. We're going to come back with Fred Feeney right after this. Hey, Scott Spears here with Colleen Marshall, NBC4. Catch her every night, and in the new documentary, Surviving Ohio State. We just had a great conversation. You can catch it on WWGH1071.com or download the TuneIn app on any mobile device by searching WGH Talk. It's absolutely free. Colleen, so great to talk with you. In 30 seconds, what do you think of the documentary?
I think that the documentary maker, Eva Orner, did a remarkable, masterful job of taking a very difficult subject, of finding and getting honest answers from people who have been through hell and back. And it's not an uplifting story, but I think it's a significant story, and we should all pay attention to it.
NBC4's Colleen Marshall, the absolute best. We're here with referee Fred Feeney. ref matches at Ohio State, talking about the hit documentary Surviving Ohio State. Again, it's available on HBO Max. I think everybody knows about it. Fred, when this documentary came out, it's only been last Tuesday. We're taping this on a Wednesday night, so it's only been 8 days ago. When it aired on essentially national television, where anybody could see it who wanted to, last Tuesday, what was your immediate response? What was the immediate response from people?
Well, I was shocked at the feedback that I got immediately from people. Like, oh my God, Fred, I watched this. I can't believe this happened. You know, I congratulations for stepping up and trying to do something. And today, I think it's over 100 people that have reached out. There's a guy that I fish with once a year, and he reached out and he saw it. So, yeah, it's just amazing how people look at. I think they're drawn to, you know, surviving Ohio State. What's that about? And then when they find out, because of all the other crap that's happened in the world and this country with students, they just couldn't believe it happened at the Ohio State University. And then they watch the documentary and, wow, you know, they just. There's a lot more that's out there that's happened at Ohio State that may come out someday. Stephen has a lot of that information that you just kind of shake your head and go, oh my God, you know, how does this not public? How, you know, and then it just gets squashed down. And because of, you know, things like you and HBO, you know, it's bringing it up to the surface, and it should be brought up. It's not. For me, it's never been about, well, how much money. It's never been about the money. It's about getting that story out and doing the right damn thing for these guys. And so, yeah, it's just a sad thing.
Talked about suppressing this. We were talking about Russ Hellickson, and again in the documentary, one of the poignant moments is the players, after it becomes public in 2018, ask for his help. They meet with him by all accounts. He says, I'll write this letter, I'm with you, I support you, and then he goes away. He doesn't do that. Why do you believe that happened?
Well, they're not players, they're wrestlers. So,
yeah, wrestlers, yes.
Basketball guys
yes,
are players.
Yes,
just a thing.
Straighten that out.
There you go.
Yeah.
Because somebody, somewhere, came in and shut them down. Now, I know for a fact that Jordan called people on the team and said, I need your help, support me, you know, back me up on this, yada, yada, yada. Hellickson, whether it was Jordan, whether it was somebody outside, a huge sponsor from Ohio State, somebody shut it down. When you watch the documentary, you'll see the trustees talk about, oh, we're so sorry about this, and what can we do to, you know, to help in this. When you look at the papers that Steve had, they're planning to do everything they can do to shut it down. You know, like, you bastards, what are you doing here? You know, and so it was never about doing the right thing. It was about protecting Ohio State.
There are some schools of thought here. Obviously, the first school of thought, I think, in a lot of people's mind is that Jordan called him and said, obviously, for my political career, I've denied this. You can't do this. Then there's the idea that the university, even though he wasn't employed by them anymore, you can't do this to us, or something else. Which do you think is the most likely of what happened with Russ Hellickson?
I think it's something else.
You think it's something else?
I do.
What would you say it is?
Well, I don't want to be sued because it's all hearsay, pretty much. But if you look at who's out there that doesn't want any of this crap ever to come out, and he's done everything in his career to keep this crap from ever coming out. If you look around Ohio State and you look up on their medical buildings, there's a name up there. And I don't know, in my own little pea brain, I'm thinking, you know what? 1 and 1 and 1 equals 3. And I don't know. I don't know anything from anything, but I think that people way up in stratosphere of relationships, billionaires, they just shut it down.
The confusing thing, again, I've talked to a lot of people who have viewed this, who have taken a great interest in it. And one of the things that's confusing, not that it's right, but a lot of people obviously get that Jim Jordan, if he is lying about this, which you say he absolutely is doing that for his political career. He's still got to survive, and he obviously believes for whatever reason that this is going to hurt him.
Well, there's not very many ultra-conservative Republicans that enjoy homosexual, bisexual, stuff, right? Though I'm shocked at how many there have been arrested.
There have been, yeah, certainly. There's certainly, the number's certainly not zero, that's for sure. But
exactly.
But we're going to leave Jordan over because I want to come back to him in a second, right, because there's also something else interesting. But that's a lot of people, that's what they write his reasoning off for doing this. But Hellickson has had a great career. He is not working for the university. You would think the donors would not have a big impact on him. And if he would do this at this point, if he would admit it, if he would have admitted it in 2018, if he would admit it today,
right,
he would be seen as kind of a hero in a way.
Exactly.
So why handle it this way?
That's a great question. And in the documentary, you see that I see Russ every now and then. I'm a wrestling assigner today. And one of the schools I assigned for, he has an allegiance to. And I saw him, and he came up and shook us, a very friendly man. And in fact, there's a Russ Hellickson wrestling league for smaller kids, biddies. And I got asked one time to come in and talk about rules to him. And I didn't, Russ wasn't there, but, I went and did that. But he came up and shook my hand and said, hey, as you see in the documentary, and I just said, hey, Russ, when are you going to tell the truth? And he goes, Fred, it's good to see you,
That was it.
And walked away. But that's a great question. You would think if he has 500 sons, what's keeping him, or what kept him, what stopped him from giving a damn? And that's a great question, and I don't know what that is. Somebody got to him.
Well, and there's a lot of other names here if you get in deep and read the reports and look at stuff, and we can all understand that, and these are well-known names. But he is really, at this point, having a finger pointed right at him in this documentary, saying, you knew, you said you were going to back us, you didn't back your wrestlers. I mean, he really comes off as a villain. He could, what is stopping him now, after this documentary, from saying something?
When I saw this and I walked out of the Tribeca Theater, my first thought was how damning this is to Russ Hellickson.
Yes.
And Jordan's Jordan. He wasn't the head coach. And I'm sure Jordan and Russ had to have a talk one day and go, here's our story. We're going to stick to it. But my God, it's damning to Hellickson. And I don't know how he sleeps at night, knowing what he's done to his 500 kids.
However he got through the last 20, 30 years with this, but now that this documentary, I mean, he's still around. I mean, he knows this, I'm sure he's seen it. This documentary has aired.
Yeah, I don't know if he's seen it.
You don't think he would see it? Watch it? No?
I'm not a betting guy, but I don't think he knows the outcome, right?
He knows it, but does he realize how awful it makes him? It has ruined his career regardless.
Well, there have been wrestlers that have reached out to him, and he just says, hey, I'm not talking about it. I'm just not talking about it.
I would say prior to this documentary, I don't think he was seen like he is now. People definitely know who he was. They know what he did. And now, I mean, how does he go out in public?
His legacy, it sure ruins that a little bit.
Yeah.
Hugely. I mean, I'm on a couple different board of directors, and there are times that I have to go out and get somebody to be a speaker at a big fundraising thing. Sure as hell ain't going to be Russ Hellickson. Right?
Well, and that's the thing. I think about, obviously he's not going to speak to the media right now, although maybe he should, but there've got to be people, 100 have reached out to you. I'm sure people have Googled him. You can find people nowadays, even if he hasn't watched it, I'm sure people are sending him questions and emails and maybe even calling him. I don't know.
Going to his house and, boycotting or putting the sign in his yard. I don't know. But yeah, there's got to be, and this group of wrestlers, or this group, what is it, over 2,000 now, that have been identified as being abused by Strauss. That's a lot of people. And I would think High Estate at some point has to suffer some type of a advertisers, commercial, supporters have to go, you know what, I know for a fact, because I've had people that I'm on Facebook with who, and I won't name names, but they've said, I've stopped giving money. Well, you get enough of those people, that's got to hurt High Estate at some point, some way. And the big donors, the big commercial guys, it's got to hurt High Estate somehow, somewhere.
Want to come back to Jim Jordan here for a second. He is very young during these years when this is going on. As you say, he's not the head coach. He's the assistant coach. He's a very young guy. And again, it's hard to make, none of us have a crystal ball. But, I mean, he came after you. Obviously, you're a 40-year-old referee at that point. Yeah. Is it believable that maybe something like this happened to Jordan?
Oh, wow.
I mean, he's there.
Wow, I don't know. He didn't wrestle there.
Right.
But
I'm sure he was
Wisconsin.
In the locker room. What was it? He's 2 lockers down or something,
yeah,
we've heard?
Yeah, from Strauss.
Yeah.
That's a great question. I don't know. Wouldn't that be something if he stuffs that down so much that, I don't know.
I think somebody has brought this up. It certainly wasn't the first, but his response to it in the beginning was very anger.
Well, it snapped him like a twig.
Yeah, it snapped him like a twig.
And those are big words, for a tough guy, right? But in reality, you don't think Mark Coleman's a tough guy? You don't think Richie's a tough guy, or Will, or Ratliff, or any of these guys? They're all tough guys. Wrestling is a hell of a sport. They would have snapped him in half, but they didn't. Why didn't they? Because, oh my God, what did just happen to me? I can remember being a young boy, and I thought about this the other day driving somewhere. And I was trying to think about how many times have I ever done anything, and I did something. Oh, I'll tell you one. I'll tell you one exactly. I went to St. James LS parochial school, grade school, and there was a drugstore right beside us, Quinn's, and I stole a candy bar there one time, and I couldn't tell anybody I stole it, but I did steal it. I was a Catholic kid too. I was an older boy, and that just troubled me so much, and I just finally pushed it down so deep, and I years later I went to a confession, and I told a priest, I said, this happened years ago, but I felt so bad about it. I just acted like it didn't happen. I just didn't tell anybody. He goes, well, what was it? And I stole a candy bar from Quinn's drugstore, and he actually laughed in the confessional, and he goes, well, I think God forgives you for that. But we talked about that later, face to face, about how people just bury stuff because they don't know how else to handle that, So I could imagine if somebody, you look at the guys that got raped, I don't know whether they were drugged, I don't know whether it was willingly, I don't know whether it was coerced, whatever. But if they sure didn't want that and they didn't know what to do and they did it, you got to bury those feelings down. And there may be 5,000 people, who knows what the real number is, but it's dealing with that guilt. Who do you talk to? You don't talk to your mom or dad about it, and I feel so bad for those guys. And so that's the only thing I could imagine it to was stealing a candy bar and feeling so bad that I did it, I never stole again.
Well, another one of the layers here that's very interesting, again, Dr. Strauss is there from 78 to 98, and there was a report that was done after the 2018 accusations, and a report that Ohio State compiled. And when you look at the athletic department in that 2-decade period, we've already identified the wrestling department and who was there, but we're talking Earl Bruce, we're talking John Cooper, we're talking Andy Geiger, we're talking Gene Smith, Urban Meyer, we're talking Randy Ayers, who was a popular basketball coach there. We're talking Gordon Gee as the president. And this report essentially does say that most of the names we just mentioned probably, if not did know that this was going on. If depositions do come about, when they come about, I'm sure a lot of these people's names who are still with us are probably going to be on that deposition list, and it's not going to do their career very well.
Not at all. I asked Rocky the other day, when are those going to start? And he said soon, or maybe they already have. But could you imagine being Urban Meyer and what was the black AD?
Gene Smith.
Gene Smith. I can remember. I would go to the Ohio State matches, the wrestling matches, and I assigned all of the wrestle-offs. They'd have wrestle-off in the room and then wrestle-off up on Cavelli, and I would assign those guys. But during a Big Ten match or whatever match, Coach, the wrestling coach, Ryan, they'd have me sit on the end of the table, head table, so that these coaches who came in that knew me as an official, as a good official, they could come to me and bitch without going to the table and bitch. And I would tell them the truth. I'd go, hey, that was a good call, just let it go. Or, that was a crap call, I'd go bitch about it. And that was the great thing that we did at Ohio State. I got in trouble for doing that by the NCAA. The guy that was in charge of the coordination or officials told me I couldn't do that any longer. He said it was a conflict of interest, which I argued, and he goes, we're done talking about it. So that was over. But yeah, there was Gene Smith and I we'd talk every now and then about different things. Never about this. Didn't talk about this. But yeah, it's got to come out someday. And I just, oh wow, to depose some of these guys. You got to tell the truth. It's not like I take the fifth or something like that. So, and I don't think Ohio State wants that. Could you imagine? Because, as you know, there were things that happened in football, right? Coaches beating wives and this and that, and the head coaches knew it and they didn't do anything about it. There are football players that are John Doe's in this thing. Football players, big football players. So when all that comes out, it doesn't do Ohio State. No.
Well, you've got a guy like Gordon Gee, who's still the president at West Virginia. I mean, he's still down there in a very prestigious position.
It's only 2-3 hours away, bring them in and depose them.
Well, and I think that's also one of the shocking things about this is we look at these people. I mean, they were larger than life. They were personalities in Ohio, and that they would let this go on. Hellickson probably wasn't on the tip of everybody's tongue, but certainly Earl Bruce, John Cooper, Gordon Gee, those were names people certainly knew.
Yeah, somebody knows something. And hopefully it comes out in a disposition. And I got to tell you, my attorneys in this case are out of Washington, D.C. And Adele, and what's his name, that was in the documentary, Mazel, they are, they know exactly how to ask questions, So it's not going to be pretty. And that's why Ohio State, I think, is going to start some mediation and talk about this, but who knows? I mean, still it comes out to the group has to say yes or no, right? And
and there's a lot more here, but I mean, the big question right now is what is Ohio State doing? Why are they prolonging this? Why? What at this point it's out. I mean, they can't put it back in.
No.
And even to some degree, they have admitted, yes, it happened.
Could you imagine if the president of Ohio State, the military guy, that's the new guy, just comes up and says, you know what, enough of this. Fix this. We want this to go away, and we're going to do it the right way. And whatever settlement they need, we're going to do that. We're going to give them, help. We'll work with them however, but we're going to end this so that we don't have documentaries. We want to talk about the good stuff about Ohio State. Somebody asked me the other day, I was golfing or doing something, and I had a Ohio State thing on. And they go, how can you wear that shirt? And I go, I love Ohio State football. I love Ohio State wrestling. I don't love this section here, but I love the rest of it. I went to Ohio State. Not for long. They had this rule that they actually wanted to attend class every damn day. Imagine that.
Imagine.
And I ended up going to Vietnam. But I think at some point somebody's got to do the right thing and say, you know what, enough of this. We're going to do the right thing. We're going to fix this. And if they did, then that's the talking point. Not what happened, but how Ohio State, steps up and does the right thing here. I just don't see why they're not doing that. I don't get it.
Well, that's one of the odd things. I think when you watch the documentary, you think, now this is 7 years of newspaper articles and Colleen Marshall doing her reporting on Channel 4 and people knowing about this and questions being thrown to Jim Jordan on national television and now a documentary. And they still, Ohio State, and the people there now weren't there when this was going on.
Right.
Why in the world? They've got the money. They certainly have got the money. Why would they want to drag this on and on and on?
Well, we got the same governor now as was back then.
Yes, that's true.
And he could surely step up and go, end this. We're gonna do whatever we have to do. They work for him, right? He's kind of that boss of everything in Ohio. So why doesn't he step up and fix this? That's a great question, Governor.
Yeah, well, Mike DeWine, he's in there. I mean, how do you see him in all this? I mean, most people see him as a very moderate Republican at this point in the Republican Party.
I agree.
A guy who's been involved in the Ohio political system practically his entire life. Yeah. Why in the world let this go on?
There's got to be something more powerful above him, because if you see with DeWine and how he deals with Trump, he walks a very thin line with Trump. He doesn't want to come out as as bashing Trump or this over. He's he chooses his words very carefully when he talks about Trump and some of the crap that Trump does. But somebody somewhere got that puppet and talking, and I don't know. DeWine with one phone call could change this, and I'm not sure why the governor hasn't done that.
I thought a lot about Penn State during this because, this is recent history, Penn State's scandal. We've got Jerry Sandusky, who sits in a prison to this day because of what he did. Joe Paterno, who was as legendary as any maybe more legendary than any Ohio State coach we're talking about, was fired because of this.
Disgraced.
Statue torn down.
Yep.
They made amends right away when it became public.
Yeah.
How has Ohio State been allowed to not?
What a great question. And I sure don't have an answer. But God bless Penn State for doing what they did and fixing this. And you got a god in Joe Paterno. Him and Woody Hayes, those guys they walked on water. And somebody at Penn State said, we don't care. We're going to fire you. And your statue comes down. And could you imagine the Woody Hayes Center being changed, to somebody else's name and all that type of stuff? Someone's got to get the balls to do the right thing.
You know, something did dawn on me when I was watching the documentary, the years of Richard Strauss being there, 78 to 98. You know, Woody Hayes, I believe, is fired in 78. I believe that's when he hit the player during the game. So, you know, he's not there during this.
Right.
His legacy, I think, will be intact. But isn't it interesting, is that just one big coincidence that this doctor, who's horrible, just happens to come in the same year that Woody Hayes goes out?
Wow, that's a great. Yeah, I never realized that. Could you? I couldn't see Woody. Woody Hayes was so emotional. He actually struck a player.
He certainly
right?
did. He certainly did.
So imagine if he knew this, what he would have done.
Right.
Yeah, that's.
Awful weird timing.
Yeah,
and I haven't heard anybody bring that up.
Yeah, that's a very good. That's a good outlook there. I don't know.
When we look at this whole thing, is the documentary? Is it hard to watch?
Wow. So being involved in it, I remember when HBO flew me out to Hollywood to do the filming of it, my part of it. We actually did it at Eva's house in Hollywood, and she did that because she wanted it to be comfortable, homey, and it was. And my attorney was there in the back, and this and that, and it was they did everything they could do to make me feel comfortable, and it wasn't comfortable for me when she asked them the questions that she asked. And you'll see, and when I watched the documentary, they had to take a break at one point to let me get my composure back, because there's a lot of stuff I didn't think of. You know, or at least I shoved it back down again. But they did. She did such a good job on this. I hope she gets some awards for it too.
What would you like to see happen?
Well, above all, the high estate standing beside the governor, saying, "We apologize. We're sorry this happened. Should never have happened, and we're sorry it happened. We're sorry it took so damn long to fix this. And here's what we're going to do to make sure it never happens again." Now, they've done the third part, some crap that they've put out there. We're going to change this and change that, and, you know, that type of stuff. But they forgot the two other things, you know, the apologies. And so, again, I'm going to think about this. Somewhere in Ohio or Michigan or New Jersey or somewhere, some parent is thinking, I'm going to send my kid to Ohio State. Will they take care of my son? Or daughter? Will they do the right thing? Can I, like Colleen said when she dropped her kids off, I know they'll be safe. Well, guess what? It's a roll of the dice.
We've been chatting with Fred Feeney, referee, part of the new documentary, Surviving Ohio State. This episode's done, but we are going to have Fred on with another episode. We're going to have a panel here. 40th President of the United States, Mary Ellen Withrow, is going to join us. We're going to discuss this even further, so catch the other episode out this week as well. And Fred will also be on the radio program on Thursday morning, live, 8:15 to 10 a.m. Fred, it's been a pleasure, and we'll continue the conversation. Scott Spears for this episode, heading for the dugout.
Thank you.